Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Are you passionate about creating amazing podcasts? Terrific. You are in the right place. Welcome to Pod Talk, short conversations with podcast creators that are not just about podcasting, because I like to take the scenic route. My guest today is Rob Wreglesworth. Welcome, Rob. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me.
We always have fun beforehand, and then it's like, okay, where are we going to start? And I promised I would softball pitch the first question, and that made me think of I was in England in September of 23, and I was in a park that I won't unpack the whole story, and I'm standing next to somebody who's English, and we're watching them play this game, and I'm like standing there going, what is going on? And there are people. First of all, they're having a ton of fun and they're drinking beer. So I'm like, I think these are a bunch of like coworkers, and it was a weekday. So I love, first of all, the idea of they're swinging little short bats and they're drinking beer often at the same time. Like, what is going on? And then they're running around these, it turns out it's rounders. So it's like the other version or the precursor or whatever you want to call it of baseball, what we would call American baseball. And I found it super fun. The person that I was talking to had, she's going like, I think I played this game when I was like knee high to a grasshopper. And there was something fun about standing there. Her and I were having other conversations around movement. And we were been walking and talking and then we're like, stop, wait, what's going on here? And the opportunity to engage with these random British people who were playing this fun game on some weekday. It sort of was fun to investigate the game with this other person that I was talking to. I knew her pretty well, but we're like, what are they doing? Oh, what's going on? So when I mentioned softball pitching you the first question, the first thing I thought of is, what about podcasting really has surprised you? Or like, oh, that was surprising. But then when you went into it, it actually was like, oh no, wait, it's actually even more surprising than that. It's not just this first level. The more I peel back, the more surprising this gets. If that sounds like a question.
It does. And it's a good question to start with. Lots of things have surprised me, I think, since I started podcasting back in 2019 now. And I think it's the willingness of people to lend their time so generously, I think, is probably the thing that surprised me the most. When I first started reaching out to people to ask if they would do a podcast with me, and they were often people that it would be difficult to get a short conversation with often, or if you emailed them saying, can I just have an hour chat with you, they might have said, who are you? Or why?
Can I get a cup of tea?
Can I borrow
who are you?
Can I borrow 5 minutes of your time? Yeah, that classic question. But suddenly the podcast gave me the ability to frame a conversation with this person with a bit more meaning. They allowed them to understand a bit more about what I wanted to get from the conversation immediately. And then all of a sudden it was like this superpower. I could have an hour, potentially 2 hours of conversation with people who I thought were out of my reach almost immediately. And then obviously I've still got people that I want to get on the podcast in future who are still out of that league, I think, but I'm surprised at how many people say yes and how many people are willing to dedicate that much time to a really in-depth conversation. I think that's the thing that still surprises me now. I think I'm just delighted every time someone says yes and takes the time out to speak to me for that long.
Well, thank you so much for saying yes and joining me today. Have you ever gotten, because I've never gotten, have you ever gotten a cold outreach for a guest that you actually thought was, oh, that's somebody I want to talk to?
Yeah. Weirdly, yes. Yeah. That was why I restarted the podcast, actually. I was doing the podcast from 2019 when I did the podcast fellowship through Seth Godin with yourself, Craig, I believe. That's how we connected, and was doing it for a couple of years pretty solidly until COVID and other things happened, and it just got put on hold. Had a bit of burnout, classic. Didn't plan ahead enough. Lessons were learned, and I went away. Mistakes were definitely made in that first iteration, but learned a lot. And then paused it for a while, and thought I would potentially never come back to it. I actually never fell out of love with podcasting. I did another couple of podcasts on the side. This is similar to yourself. I've always got lots of different projects on the go. Can't help myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did one. I used to have a music blog, so I had a podcast on there, and then I had another podcast, just literally a fantasy football podcast between friends. So that allowed me to keep doing podcasting, which I love, with a little bit less pressure because they didn't have the guest element. They were purely the music one was me and my friend just chatting amongst ourselves. The fantasy football one was literally just me and my friends. So it allowed me to keep doing podcasting without the pressure of getting guests on. And then all of a sudden in 2021, I did have exactly that, a cold outreach from a guest that had been on my long list. Well, it wasn't from the guests themselves, it's from their media crew saying this person was launching a new product. They're doing the rounds. They wanted to know if the podcast was still going, if they could do an episode. And I was sat there like, oh, this is someone I'd really like to talk to. Someone I thought was out of my reach. I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to start the podcast again. So it was actually thanks to that email and thanks to that outreach that I started it up again. Did that one-off episode. Then things got delayed a little bit again, but it started the wheels in motion. And then meant I finally relaunched the podcast properly this year, and I'm going to carry it on for as long as I can now, hopefully.
I didn't realize until I was doing my homework. Should I call you out on the dates? So the pause was 4 years.
Yeah.
October 2019 to March of 23. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is like, whoa, you really... like you pulled the trigger in March of 23, like the episode's like 57 minutes long and you had a clear motivation and it was like, and there was a timed product launch. You mentioned that in the show.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, there's probably a story here. So thanks for telling me without me even having to ask.
Yeah.
But then what I wanted to ask, which you also mostly unpacked, is why was there a 10-month delay between that in March and starting in January of, I can't believe it's 2024.
Yeah. I think it's more that, Craig. It's just time just passes quickly. It's less the, you sit down and you stop doing something and next thing you know, it's 2024. But
the river of denial moves quickly.
But it was so that episode in 2023 I sort of rushed out because of the request of the guest. They had a product being launched, so I did it, but I knew I wasn't ready to relaunch, and I didn't want to make the same mistake that I made in 2019, which led to burnout, which meant I didn't carry it on for as long as I wanted to, which was really refine a list of guests I wanted to speak to, do the research, not just reach out to the first guest that pops into mind, but really hone, like see who's been on other podcasts, see who has a good story to tell, because that's the key. I've made the mistake in the past of, my podcast is speaking to innovators, founders who are tackling environmental problems, and you can have someone that's got the most amazing product and solution, but they may not have a very interesting story behind it, whereas you might have something that's a less amazing solution, but the founder themselves is a really, really interesting person who has an amazing story to tell. So I wanted to do that research, find the best guests I possibly could, batch a few episodes, and then launch again this year I've got like 5 or 6 episodes in the bank already, so I can just chill slightly and focus a bit more on things like social media, all that kind of stuff, which I couldn't do before because I was just going from episode to episode, editing and then going on to the next one and then editing it and then worrying about who the next guest was going to be. And then, that's what led to that eventual giving up for a while.
There are so many things in there. When you think ahead, where are we? It's February already. What? It's not even January.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's February of 24. And I too have, I'm like a checklist guy. I'm holding up a piece of paper with little Post-it notes. The blue ones are one show. The pink ones are this show. And I'm, like 3 weeks out. So this one goes like 3 weeks from now. And on one hand, I find having them in the can does relieve the pressure of like, what's next? But I kind of fixed that problem by, up until this year, I would just ship them in the hour after I recorded them used to freak people
Mm.
out. I'd be like, I'd end the call, I'd open up my editor. It's a half-hour show. I don't make any edits. I just level the thing and ship it. Making the episode notes took the most time.
Mm.
And that was fun because then it was like I never had a cue. And I don't care about I didn't care about when I was publishing. So it was just like, hey, great conversation, ship it. Great conversation, ship it. Sometimes I'd have a week where I'd do like 3 episodes in a row, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and people would be like, hey, cut it out. I can't listen that fast. But now that I have these stacked up, I'm actually having the other problem. I feel bad because I happen to know 2 people out from this one. I had a really great conversation. People are, I think, going to be really excited to hear it. And I feel like I'm sitting on it.
Mm.
Do you find that you have this tension, the other tension of like, embarrassment of riches?
Yeah, definitely do feel that. And especially when I have a really good conversation, I just want to get it out and want to tell people about it and shout about it. It is finding that balance. And also I've had things like recording episodes before Christmas and they start talking about Christmas presents or start asking me how what the holiday season has in store. And I'm like, oh, do I edit that out or do I just say to everyone that it was before?
Leave that stuff in.
Just leave that stuff in. People get it. I know, but it is finding that balance and what's right for me as a podcaster, I guess, within my schedule of other things that I'm doing. And because everything's quite evergreen in these topics and stuff, does move fairly quickly, but it's valid for at least a year or so. So as long as I'm getting things out in a couple of months after it's been recording, I'm not too bothered. And I just made that decision to the benefits of being able to do some video, to do some clips, to get the show notes perfect. It is finding a balance, and I do definitely stray too far that way sometimes and let perfection be the enemy of the good a lot of the time. There's definitely something to be said for setting a deadline, doing the work, and just getting it out. And I'm guilty definitely of the over editing maybe sometimes, and for no good reason, but it's just in me. That's what I'm like. So trying to get better at it.
I've been trying to focus more on, okay, so I love conversation. With people listening who don't know this, conversation is like, that's my thing. So I love this part. I always say to people, my favorite part is between record and stop. Everything out before that and after that, okay, I'm willing to do the work. But I've been trying to remind myself or trying to train myself to think about the stuff after stop, which normally I'm like, oh, I don't want to do anything after stop. I'm like Mr. Lazy. I've been trying to train myself to think of it as revisiting the conversation. And so far this is kind of working. It's like, oh, I get to, like, this isn't actually today, but like I get to go back to that conversation that I had with Rob. And a lot of times I don't even listen through. I just kind of like edit really quickly, but I'm like, maybe I'm actually going to, after I do the final mix down, I'll actually listen to the whole thing. Like I'll sit down with my cup of coffee and like revisit the conversation. And then I don't like doing episode notes, but maybe this is the opportunity to like, yeah, but what was the best thing? Like I've been trying to change my mindset around that so that, because the other problem that I have to get away from is I drop the episode, I publish it, and then it's just crickets, right? Because it's podcasting. We never get any feedback from anybody. If I wait for that point to get excited about the show, well, no, it's way too late. So I've been trying to like pay more attention to getting some enjoyment out of the stuff after I press stop. I don't know if that resonates with you or like, how do you judge? Okay, I'm never hiding behind perfection. That is never my problem. I never get lost in there.
No, I think I definitely, for that reason that you state, I really enjoy listening back and editing and learning from the episode, because there's so much to learn from the guests that I speak to that often, I'm so in the moment when I'm doing the conversation and trying to be present, but I'm also thinking about, is it definitely recording? Is it, like
I'm watching
all
the
these
levels,
little things,
and we're at 14 minutes and 24 seconds, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, they said they had a hard exit this time. Like all these things are going through your head, and I try and be as present as I can in the conversation, because I do love actually having a conversation with these people, but being able to listen back and analyze it and then pick out the really good quotes so I can do a little video snip, which I've started doing in the new series, because it tends to get, it's a bit of extra work, but it tends to get a different audience in, because I feel like I've already tried lots of things with the podcasting outreach itself, but can I get in more listeners by clipping up short videos of the episode? So going through the edit helps me pick out really good quotes that I can use for that. And I think more than anything for me, something I'm still trying to get much better at is identifying verbal tics. He says, and then with a big after it. Those kind of things, making sure that I improve every episode I do, trying to understand whether I'm speaking too quickly or too slowly or not pausing enough. Those things I'm always trying to get better. So I think listening back to the episode helps me do that as well.
Yeah, that self-improvement feedback loop can be a stern taskmaster. I definitely agree with you. I do that in the beginning. I've told this story before, but at one point I had a team of people helping me with with another show. And I still say so a lot. Like, that's okay, fine. And I'm leaving it in. But they threatened to do a supercut of all of the times that I had said so and turn it into like a Christmas song. So. And they said they wouldn't even have to pitch them. Like, they could just find ones that are the right pitch. That was when I actually began, all right, I'm going to try and remove that tick. So I completely agree with you about, yes, there needs to be a self-improvement, especially for Craig, self-improvement loop. But I find that it's important to like cut that out at the 80-20 thing. We gotta have to 20% of the work, 80% of the results to go to the next thing.
Exactly. You have to be so careful, like you say, because then you realize it's a thing and then you're thinking about it more and you just get into this horrible loop of, it's not good. So you're right. I think learning to find that balance, as with so many things, I just enjoy the editing process. I enjoy the conversations, but I'm
shuddering.
I'm shuddering. I used to do quite a bit of music production and in a former life, and I don't do that as much anymore. So actually getting into the editing software and doing bits and bobs with EQ and stuff, actually weirdly enjoy. So not for everyone, but I don't see it as time wasted. I could just sit down with a cup of tea and my headphones on, re-listen to the conversation, and make sure it's all good. If I was getting episodes out sort of 2 or 3 times a week, or it was something a lot more rapid fire, that would probably drive me insane. But I'm trying to publish every other week at the moment and really take the time to make sure it's polished as I can.
You really still want it to be bespoke. It's this custom bespoke tailoring. Is there a the feedback loop just caught me. I was about to say, is there a piece of your process? But then I went, don't pop the peas into the microphone. I got stuck. Is there a piece of your process that you think is currently the rate limiting part of it? Like, is there something that, if I could figure out a better way or a way to stop or to eliminate or minimize, like what is actually the thing that slows you down?
Good question. I think in the first instance, it was trying to over edit and get it down to what I thought was a reasonable length for a podcast episode. And now I don't know. I need to get more feedback on this. And like you say, it's quite difficult to get feedback in real time from listeners. But after I've done a few episodes, I'm going to try. But I've just started putting out the full conversation instead, and then potentially doing some shorter clip episodes later down the line, because that was what was taking the time. It's like I was just sat there going, I'd always say to myself, if you feel yourself getting bored, that needs to go. So I'll be sat there listening and going, just double overthinking it, thinking, I find it boring, but maybe other people wouldn't. Maybe it's just because I know the topic and they don't, so they might find it interesting. And I've been stung by that before when you get into more technical topics around things like the environment, climate change, whatever it might be, things that I've talked about 100 times because I've been working in the area, or it can seem mundane and old hat to me, but could be really interesting and insightful to a listener. So I've gone to the other end of the spectrum now and just decided to ship the whole conversation pretty much unedited, unless there's any horrendous bits that need cutting out. So that's definitely
squalling cats get cut, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely helped me cut down the process and enjoy it all a bit more. But yeah, apart from that, it's the show notes and stuff like that definitely is still something that just takes a bit longer than I'd wanted. I get really excited about getting the episode out the next day, and I've got it all uploaded, and then I'm like, I said to the guest throughout the episode, I'll put that in the show notes. I'll put that in the show notes. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. And that's the bit that I'm more into the audio than the written part of it. So it becomes like a bit of a chore, but I'm getting better at that as well, I think, slowly.
Getting caught on process. I looked down, I'm like, I haven't made any notes yet. Well, here's a little tip for people listening. I've started using ChatGPT 4, which is not the free one. It's not particularly expensive, but it's not the free one. And they enable you to attach and upload the transcript. Don't bother. It doesn't do what you wish it would do, which is upload it once and then let me have a conversation about the document. That doesn't work. It turns out, though, this is what I've been doing lately for like the last 40 or so episodes across all my shows. So not just this one. I actually cut apart. I'm a software nerd. I wrote software that does this for me. I cut apart my transcript into pastable size chunks because you can't just dump unlimited text into chat. So it cuts it like 8 pieces. And then I tell chat, be quiet. I'm going to dump you a bunch of transcript. Just acknowledge receipt. And I paste in all these things and it goes, got it. Then you can actually have a conversation about your transcript. So that's my first tip is like, if you want to use AI, I have literally signed up for all of the services that do it. They all suck because it's really hard to get a raw transcript into the AI, the large language model, so that it will actually talk to you about it. So that's the thing I've been doing is dumping the transcript in chunk by chunk. You can do it with ChatGPT 3.5, which is free. I think 4 does a better job, but you can snip, like if you just paste it in, it'd be like too many tokens. So you have to cut it. So cut it apart, paste it in, and then try talking to it. It can do some really nice things. It can really point out interesting bits of dialogue or give me a list of takeaways. It's good at that. But I'm coming back to the thing about show notes, and I'll mention it in the notes. I'll tell you what it can't do is find all the stuff that you said should be in the episode notes and give you a list. It can't do that.
Okay.
So I like my 2-pronged approach is if I say I'll put it in the episode notes, I reach for my pen and I write, for example, I'm writing down, Rob, what's the name of your podcast? And give me like the elevator pitch while I make a note.
Yeah.
No, actually do that.
Actually do it. So, yeah, but the podcast is called Innovate Eco. It's a podcast interviewing green pioneers with bold ideas. It's I interview and speak to founders and innovators who are doing something to tackle environmental problems. So, yeah, there's my elevator pitch. Have you written that note down, Craig?
Terrific. Yeah, no, it worked perfect. So normally as I'm chatting with somebody, I'm trying to like share some process with people. As I'm chatting with people, at some point the guest would do that spontaneously. Yep. And when they do it, I write, mention podcast. And I have my notes that I made before the thing. So the part that was always a problem for me with episode notes was if I rely on the language model, it can't do that part at all. Right. It can write a couple paragraphs and then I can wordsmith them the way I like. And then I write the resource list, the links list. So that's my tip with, you can use regular chat.
Great tip. Yeah. I can't believe I've not thought of that because I use it in work I throw in transcripts of meetings and say, give me the summary and some actions. Mm-hmm. It's really, really good at that. It'll give the number of actions to people. It'll summarize the meeting notes in a pretty concise way. So yeah, that is a great idea. I'm going to definitely give that a try.
Handwrite the resources. Yeah.
And the power of AI.
What else? Yeah, well, and I always pause because it's not AI. I don't really think anything we have is artificial intelligence yet. Because to me, it has to have agency. Oh no, let's not go. I don't want to get on this soapbox.
Yeah.
Until the thing has agency, we're not having a discussion about it being AI. But it is super useful. It is the most tireless assistant. I ask it these things and it explains it to me and it never rolls its eyes. It never goes, oh, seriously, Craig.
Have you? So you said you have 4. We can get nerdy now about ChatGPT. Have you tried making a custom GPT in it, because I actually had a go at making
I
a
have custom
podcast.
instructions. Is that what you mean? Or do you
No,
mean
the actual GPT that you can create your own GPT and you can load
I've
in
played
documents
in
and
the
you can,
sandbox, but I haven't
yeah.
really gone hog wild on that. And I've thought about doing that. Like we were talking before about listening to our own work again and like really getting in the conversation and enjoying it. Because as you know, I'm only half listening. Other half of me is trying to make a show. And I've thought about, oh, I should pour all of this in so I could talk to it. Because I kind of do that myself by hand another way. But I haven't played with it. And it's kind of the back away slowly before it eats my face,
Yeah.
toy. Have
I
you?
tried making a podcast mentor in there. Well, I could like preload with loads of stuff, and then I could ask it questions about the podcast and things like that. And it's a work in progress. But I love the idea of being able to just preload it with certain things, and then you can just dive straight into a very tailored conversation. But it's kind of similar to the custom instructions that you mentioned. It just allows
Yeah,
you
the
to
custom instructions are
not
super
have to.
simple compared to
Yeah,
that. I
yeah.
would love to have such a thing because I would love to send guests before they come to the show. I'd love to tell them which episode to go listen to. It's like, here, go listen to 140. It's like, that's not happening. But to actually ask it some questions and have it say, oh, give them episode 13. I know that's way back there, but they would really like this guest. Because that can take me a lot of like scratching my head and scrolling through the list to find who to suggest. But I think that'd be a place where the little more anecdote, watching the clock tick. I mentioned I had a team on the other show, and the person that was the production assistant who used to travel with me and like do the recordings, we would talk about guests who were coming up. And then between the two of us, we'd be like, they should listen to. So it was like, we used to have those conversations, but now I don't have that person working with me. And that's one thing I really miss is I used to call her the cohort in crime. Not that there were any crimes, but we used to think about it was like these two crazy people talking about the show. Who should be the next guest? What should they get? What order should they get published?
Yeah.
And I think that's a piece that maybe we're all missing is like, how do you suggest to your guests coming in, listen to this, like, don't listen to the last episode. You won't like it. Listen to this one. I think that's a piece that a lot of people would love to have.
Yeah, I just use it all the time, whether it's for work or for things like this, for bouncing ideas off, getting out of my own head. And I found it really useful for that. Everyone's like, it can't write blog posts, it can't write books. Like that. Well, that's not what I use it for.
Yeah.
Loads of useful things. And for me, I spend a lot of time just living in my own head and need to get out, and I try and journal and get things out onto paper and get out of my head. But actually ChatGPT can be a really useful way to just bounce ideas back and forth. Yeah
I've often thought one thing that works really well, when people start talking about transcriptions. So we're recording right now through Zencaster. This episode brought to you by not. But because the audio is separated, the transcripts are really good. Like it never gets confused about who said what or like, because it cheats. I think it transcribes them separately and then blends them together. I don't know how it does it, but very rarely do I ever see the transcript having an error. And that makes a huge difference when you give that transcript to a machine to interpret. Sometimes I pass them through other services, and unless it's reviewed by a human, which I would love to be able to pay for, unless it's reviewed by a human, sometimes you're like, that's not who said that. Or I am always in the transcript like, what? Or playing the audio back. We're a long way from machine magic.
Yeah. On transcript, do you put your transcripts out into the public domain for all your podcasts? Because I don't.
I would put them out. Like, I don't have a problem with them being published because like people like Apple are now starting to transcribe on the fly. So like, transcriptions like the horses out of the barn. It's not copyrighted. I don't put them out because I never got, I did for the longest time. I used to include the full transcripts in various places. And I did that because I know the search engines can see them. And I thought that would help bring people to the show. But my takeaway was, it's super easy to do that. Just like
Yeah.
put the thing there. But I never, and I do run into people in real life who have listened to the show and they talk about the show. I have never in any context had anybody tell me they used it or thought it was useful or appreciated that work. So I stopped doing it. What
But
I do believe works is episode notes. What were you going to say?
yeah, I was just going to say, but on the flip side, have you had in many cases of people who say they found the episode because of the transcript, i.e. the SEO works?
I've never gotten a single bit of feedback about transcripts ever in any way, shape, or form. And at one point we used to use Rev back in like 5 years ago. We used to use Rev and pay for human transcription. They make gorgeous transcripts. Yeah, that's eye-wateringly expensive.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds expensive.
So I still have those. But yeah, it's the episode notes, I think, are the sweet spot. Because it gives me, what I call a hook sentence. It gives me a summary paragraph. It gives me, when I'm done, I have some quotes and I have some good text. Search engines can find that. For a while, I used to publish a lot of podcasts with no episode notes at all, just because this takes time and I don't want to do it. But now I'm like, no, this is minimum viable podcast. It's got to have some episode notes, Craig. So I really think episode notes are the sweet spot. And I think not just machine generated, but like on the fly, automatically done, like, your personal automated assistant will transcribe or find the transcription and find the spot in the show. Because that's the next level. Take me to the place in the show where the thing I care about is talked about. So yeah, I did transcripts for a long time. I still have them. I still use them, but I don't publish them just because I don't think they add anything to the mix.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something I want to think about and do think about. I definitely used to put them in because I thought there would be an SEO reason to do it, more discovery, but I didn't get any feedback. I said one wasn't entirely convinced it was working, so I stopped doing it. But I do need to have a think more about that kind of discoverability element. At the moment, I'm just happy to get episodes out organically, find listeners, try and explore different social pathways to getting more listeners. But I need to have a bit more of a think about how to expand that reach, whether it's through show notes or through doing blog posts about the episodes or things like that. It's weighing up and balancing that time versus reward strategy and the ability to kind of split test things as well. That all takes a lot of energy and time. So
yeah, definitely. I pause because people hear me pause and they're like, oh, I wish you could say all of the things he's thinking. I on this specific show on Pod Talk, I'm experimenting with something I've been calling an in-between episode. I can't remember where I got that from. I actually tried to figure out where I first heard that term and I couldn't figure it out. And the idea being, instead of baking the stuff that we'd normally bake into the outro, like, hey, please go support Pod Talk for realsies, people. Please go support Pod Talk. And then like, here's the link and here's the thing. Instead of baking that in the outro, which nobody ever listens to in the history of ever. I took that out and I put it in a dedicated, just little host on mic episode. And then I've been moving it. So it turns out that if you adjust the publication date, it moves it in your feeds, but it doesn't mark it as new. So people who find the show will see that as a new episode and it's second, just behind the most recent episode. And they can listen if they want, or they can completely not listen, just like they would have done if I baked it into the show. But the upside is I don't have this. I used to not want to put things in the show because I'm like, well, that URL, I got episodes that are old enough. It's like, oh, wow, I need to edit that and remove my thinking there. So that's something I've started playing with because I'm thinking it gives me an opportunity to occasionally talk directly to the audience.
That is interesting. Yeah. And I completely agree with I always do the outro anyway. And with the complete knowledge that, and looking at the statistics that basically everyone drops off just before then anyway. But it just feels comforting and the right thing to do to end the show like that.
Yeah. It's tricky to figure out how to split, how to walk the balance of at what point am I, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. At what point am I just, I'm hiding and trying to perfect this? And at what point am I, no, this is something that people will be like, wait, what's going on? Like in the intro, that thing that I read it in because I don't want to do post-production intro recordings. So I'm like, okay, that means I have to have an exact thing that I'm going to say. So it hits all the points of like, if this is the first time you've ever heard the show, this is my name and this is what we're doing. And this is Rob. So yeah. All right. Just watching our time tick away. I think that's as bad a place as any to stop. So thanks so much. I'll put it together. It comes out. Oh, today is the 5th. It comes out on like the 22nd if things go according to my plan. So I'll put it together with some episode notes written with a little bit of help from ChatGPT. So
Nice.
Thanks so much, Rob, for joining me today.
That's all right. Thanks very much for having me, Craig.